when you have somebody new on your team, as a leader, it's really important you go and do, I call this hypercare, especially the first 90 days. It's really important because that's when people, it's like when you raise your kids between the age of 0 and 3, this is where that bonding happens. Well, in a company, that bonding happens in those first 90 days. So as a leader, go meet people, have a coffee. Hey, Paul, where do you live? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? How far do you have to commute to come to work? What do you do on your spare time? So then, you have a favorite football team. What's your favorite football team? Oh, you're not into football. You like baseball. Okay, tell me about baseball. Have you ever played? Because all of that will give me a way to engage with you on a regular basis. Knowing all that will make it a lot easier for us to have a relationship.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Ferranbi, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. Today, I have the honor of having Valerie Cockerell on the show. She's a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and former Disney cast member. She is passionate about leadership and has shared her expertise around the world. So that was just a little bit about you, Valerie. But how about you introduce yourself the way you would do it?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about meeting you and sharing some of our insights, with you. I am, as I'm sure you've picked up already, and you can tell from my accent, I was born and raised in France and lived there for the first 16 years of my life. And I was a very curious child, and I knew there was a whole big world out there that I wanted to go and see and visit. And when I was 16, I realized, if I want to do this, I better learn English because this is the way around the world. So I moved to London and I became an au pair, and I worked with a family, babysat children, and stayed in London for about a year and a half until my English was good enough. And then I went back to France and finished my studies. Reason why I share this is because that was a decisive moment for me, in the sense that it allowed me, my English being, pretty good by then, allowed me to get a job with Disney. My very first job with Disney was in 1987, and I was a kind of an ambassador for the French pavilion at Epcot in Orlando. So I got to be in Orlando for a year. I had a 1-year visa. And after that, I went back to France, not thinking in the least that this was ever going to be a career. And I went back to France, and about 2-3 years later, I got a call from Disney, and they said, we will open a park in Paris in about a year and a half, and we would like to hire you because not only you speak English, but you understand the Disney culture and American culture. And it literally, Paul, I promise you, it took me literally 3 seconds. And I said, yep, where do I sign? I'm ready to go. And I did, and I was part of the opening team of Disney in Paris. And I worked there for 5 years, met my Prince Charming, my husband Dan, who was on the opening task force. He's American and had been assigned to opening the parking lot at Disneyland Paris. And then both of us relocated to the US in 97. I worked for Walt Disney World for a while. Then I stopped working. And my background with Disney, by the way, is in retail. I manage multiple retail locations and then assortments for Disney. For Epcot, for the Disney Cruise Line. And eventually I stopped working. We have 3 children, took care of my kids for a little bit, and went back to Disney working for the Disney Institute. So I don't know if you're familiar with Disney Institute, but it is the outside training arm of the Disney organization. So a lot of companies out there want to learn about Disney, how they manage to deliver this great customer service, considering the volume, of business that they do. So we train outside organization on the Disney's approach to leadership and Disney's approach to customer service. So I did a bit of that in Florida, in California, in Canada also, because I could do it in French. And then in 2018, Dan and I decided to leave Disney. And ever since, we have been working together. We have our own company. We consult with, as you mentioned earlier, with individual and organization in the US and abroad, and it's been a lot of fun. We really enjoy what we're doing now. So,
wow,
voila,
that is
as we say in French.
Voila, yes,
Yeah.
that is a phenomenal story. And so I know un peu de français. Je prends une classe de français en lycée.
Wow. On va
Yeah.
parler en français alors.
Oui, un peu. So for those who don't speak French, and my pronunciation may or may not have been good enough, I just said I speak a little bit of French. I took some French in high school. So.
You're doing fantastic.
Thank you. A little bit out of practice, trying to get back to it. But that is phenomenal, your story, being a part of creating Disneyland Paris from the very beginning. And so talk me through that a little bit more, because I know you mentioned was it the experience you had in Orlando for about a year, and then you said like 2 to 3 years later, they just called you. Was there any expectation of work? It seemed like there was, but was there any expectation of working for Disney after you were there for a year?
Not at all. Not at all. I actually went back to France and worked for a bank. I was an investment advisor. And for some reason, in the back of my mind, I thought I wanted to work on the stock exchange, and I wanted to be a stockbroker.
Wow.
And this is how, I quickly realized that the banking world I wasn't a right fit for them. And when Disney called, the Disney culture, the environment in which you work, was just a much better fit for me. It fitted my personality. It fitted the kind of environment I enjoyed and I thrived in.
Have you enjoyed listening to the IncrediPaul podcast? Are you looking for a way to support it? Or maybe you just want some swag? Check out the IncrediPaul store today. We have shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, hats, stickers, and so much more. Go to IncrediPaul.org, IncrediPaul.org, and click on the store link. Or go to the link in my socials bio and click on the IncrediPaul shop. Looking forward to seeing your IncrediPaul look.
And in retrospect now, looking back at my career, often people wonder, they talk about values in organizations. And I never thought at the time, I could not articulate it this way, thinking my values really align with Disney and the Disney culture align with my personality. And none of that worked in the banking world for me. My values did not align. The environment did not fit my personality. And now I can see that. I mean, it was just so obvious. But when I was in my 20s, it was not something I thought about. And it's something I talk to my kids a lot is, make sure you work for an organization where you are going to be comfortable, when you can be yourself. Because when you can be yourself, you're authentic, you're genuine, you're comfortable, and you don't have to pretend every day, and you're going to be more successful and a lot happier. Don't worry about the money and the benefits and all of that. You do worry about it to some extent, but more importantly, pay attention to this, because if you are comfortable there, you'll be able to succeed and you'll do really great and you'll be happy. So this is something I've learned, kind of the hard way, because I spent a couple of years working for a bank and suddenly going like, no, that's not my cup of tea. So Disney came, the timing was just perfect. And Disneyland Paris was a huge project. They recruited 12,000 people.
Wow.
Some of them were Americans.
All at once? 12,000?
Oh yeah, yes. We opened with one park, one shopping destination, and 6 hotels and a golf course. So that was 12,000 people from all over Europe. Some came from the US. So it was a big melting pot of different cultures. People who had, like me, who had the Disney culture already, were knowledgeable about it, and people who were coming from all kinds of organization, retail organization, hospitality organization, a little bit of all over the place. So it was a terrific project to work on. It was really interesting.
Yeah, it really sounds like it, from the different cultures coming together. And even what you mentioned as far as you were in the banking space, maybe thought you wanted to go to New York Stock Exchange, realized that was not for you as far as the culture. It is. I like that you mentioned that as far as being focused on the culture and how you fit into an organization instead of being focused on just the money. Because if you work your way high enough in any organization, the money is going to come. But if you focus on the money, like you mentioned, you're not going to enjoy coming to work every day if the culture's not a good fit for you.
Yeah, and you spend a whole bunch of time working, so you want to be somewhere where you can be yourself. You don't want to pretend. And this all goes down, there may be a little difference with the values, and you can, if you slightly misalign with the values, you can work your way there. But if it's really not in, like for me, the banking world was just not in my blood. It wasn't in my DNA. And I was just way too nice and too much empathy. I was all about serving and
also
being,
baking's not about serving.
No, not at all. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest with you. But anyway, it's not, there's nothing wrong with working in a bank, by the way. It's just, I just wasn't cut out for that.
Fair enough. There's different professional opportunities that some people really enjoy, and it's their fit. But for you didn't want to work for a bank or New York Stock Exchange. You wanted to work for the most wonderful place on earth.
Yeah, exactly. The happiest place on earth.
Happiest place on earth.
And it was, I spent 16 years working for Disney, both in France and in the US. And it was a terrific experience. I learned a lot. And it's a great environment. It's a fun environment. People are there. It's the biggest entertainment company in the world. I mean, who doesn't want some of that pixie dust, right?
That magical pixie dust. Like you mentioned that you worked with the was it, you said the Disney Institution? Is that what you mentioned? That
I work with Disney Institute, yes.
Disney Institute.
And retail first. The first 9 years of my career were, actually the first 11 years of my career were with retail. And then the last 5-6 years were with Disney Institute. So.
Okay. So with the Disney Institute, were the people that you worked with, was it primarily other people in the entertainment industry, or like really companies all abroad are trying to instill that culture?
No, that's a great question. Here's the thing. Disney is a very successful organization. And what we've come to realize is that what makes Disney successful has nothing to do with entertainment. There's no, in fact, my husband and I now, we teach a workshop to a lot of organization and individual, and we call it the method to the magic. And that's the hint to Disney. Yeah. But we always start the workshop by saying, we have bad news for you. There is no magic, none whatsoever.
Wow.
What makes a company like Disney successful is all about processes, clarity, consistency, attention to detail, and taking care of people, because people, your employees, your front line, deliver your bottom line. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the magic happens. And if you can put all these processes in place, train people properly, make sure you put the right people in the right job, support them, encourage them, and things, the magic will happen. But there's a lot of hard work behind the scene. It's not a coincidence. You don't just take fun, nice, happy people, throw them in the theme park and tell them, go make people happy. And that's it, It is not that easy. But it's simple. It is simple. It's about treating people right, your customers and your employees, because like I said, at the end of the day, the people who are going to deliver that magic are your frontline employees. So you have to treat them right and make sure they want to do what they do, not because they have to, but because it's the right thing to do and they enjoy doing it. And if you can do that in an organization, it doesn't matter if you're in entertainment, if you're in the pharmaceutical world, if you're a hospital, if you're a shipping company, accounting firms, realtors, anybody can do that. And it's interesting because when my husband and I, we left Disney and we started working with different organizations, we expected that the vast majority of our business would be in the hospitality world. And in fact, it's about maybe 10-15% of what we do.
10 or 15%?
Yeah. The companies we interact with are, like I said, shipping companies and dentist offices and
Wow.
just accounting firms and hospitals and this kind of place, because the principles apply to any organization. It doesn't matter if it's a big organization or a small one. It doesn't matter your industry. And more importantly, we tell them you don't need to have deep pockets to do what Disney does. Of course, Disney has, being the biggest entertainment company in the world, it is, a lot of people look at us, well, it's easy for Disney to do all this. But most of what they do that really is significant and makes a difference for the guest or for the employee really doesn't cost that much money. Making sure that you're respectful with people, that you treat them right, you treat them as individual, that you are knowledgeable about your job, and you share that knowledge with your customers and your guests so that they have the best experience possible. Doesn't matter if you're Disney or if you're a yogurt shop somewhere around the corner, or you sell tennis shoes, or I don't know. It doesn't matter what it's all about really developing people and putting them in the right position so they can really deliver this great service or this great product to your clients. And when the clients have a great experience or a great product, I tell you what, they come back to you, they advertise you, they talk about you positively, and there's nothing better than word of mouth, and it's free. Word of mouth is free. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
So it's easy to spend millions of dollars in marketing to bring people to your organization your first time, but how do you bring them back again and again and again? And it's all about delivering a great experience.
And that's where the magic happens. That's the pixie dust that you were talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That is interesting. I would not have guessed that a lot of the organizations that come to Disney Institute, or a lot of organizations that you and your husband Dan work with, are not in the hospitality or entertainment space. I would have think, well, Disney is the biggest there. You came from Disney, that those would be the people gravitating to you.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes sense that where you talked about the processes and really the servant leadership about putting your people first, because there's a difference between managing your people and leading your people. I've heard, and you may have heard it said too as well, that managers do the right things, but leaders do things right. So as far as how you, go ahead.
No, I think one of the most basic thing is, if you talk to a leader, and a great leader will tell you, my team members do not work for me. I work for them. My role is to make sure that they have the resources, the skills, the talent, the headcount needed to do to be successful. My role is to move roadblocks for them. My role is to anticipate opportunities or problems or challenges. My role is to point them in the right direction. That's what I do. I am here to work for them so they can be successful at what they do. And great leaders will tell you that, and because if you're a manager, for me, being a manager, and by the way, I need to say that when I first became a manager, I was in my 20s. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I was probably one of the worst managers, because I thought, I thought that being a leader, actually, I was probably a good manager, but a really bad leader, because I thought it was about giving, setting expectations and then making sure what I was saying was being done the way I wanted. And this is where, to your point, the difference between being a manager and a leader. A manager will set expectation and check that it's being done. But once you turn around and you're not there, what do your team members do? Now, if you're a leader and you really develop people and show them the way, tell them in which direction they need to go, and explain to them why it's the right thing to do.
Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to IncrediPaul.org/coaching IncrediPaul.org/coaching or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself.
And make sure that they have everything they need in order to do this. Then you can walk away and they're going to continue to do the right thing because they understand why it's worth doing and why it is important to do it. And you also, as a leader, will make sure that everybody in your organization understand that they are important and they contribute as much as you do as a leader. I always say an organization is like a puzzle. And everybody in the organization holds a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't matter if the vice president or if you're the person who makes the popcorn on Main Street in the middle of Magic Kingdom, right? Everybody holds a piece of the puzzle. Now, if you've ever done a puzzle and you're missing a piece, it's really frustrating, number one, but it's also glaring. That's all you see. It's that hole in the middle of this beautiful image, right? Well, it's the same with experience. When one piece of the puzzle is missing, it doesn't matter if that piece is from, the vice president, the person who works in HR, the person who's behind the scene working in IT, or the person who cooks the food or orders the supply. It doesn't matter. The problem is there and it's still glaring. So if you can convey to your team members that they all have their piece is valuable, just as anybody else, and they know that, let me tell you, when people know that they are relevant, that they make a difference, and that they're part of a team, they will get engaged in the organization, they'll be motivated to do the right thing, and they will deliver for the organization. And that's the difference between managing and leading,
Your piece is valuable. That's really good. For just understanding that what you mentioned, no matter you're at the top of the organization or you're the person who is selling concessions on the park floor, that if something is not right, it is glaring. I love the way that you put that your piece is valuable.
Yeah. And the same thing goes with the guest or with your clients. Your clients matter, and they're not just one out of 50,000 people. What can you do to customize? What can I do to customize my product or my service to Paul and his family? So that Paul walks away thinking, you know what? She cares about me. She delivered. She listened to me. She paid attention. She made sure I had the right product for my need. And that is how you get loyalty from your customers. So as much as you do that as a leader, as much as you do that for your employee, the organization needs to do that, and the employees need to do that for every single guest or customer of the organization. You don't want to just be one in a million. You want to be, treated as a person, as an important person. It's like I always say, it's like when you walk in a restaurant, somebody can say, "Hey, good evening, sir. How many in your parties, whatever, where would you like to sit?" Or somebody will say, "Good evening, Mr. Farambi, welcome back to our restaurant." Yes. When you're being recognized, you're a person, somebody who matters. Now you're going back to that restaurant again and again, because just that little moment makes a big difference. You're not just anybody. You belong there. You are welcome there. You appreciated there. And, you need to convey that to your employees. You need to convey that to your customers.
That personalization that you just talked about, that is so good, as far as just adding the person's name to understand that they are not just a part of the whole group, that individual person matters. Yeah. So phenomenal. I can see why Disney is the most magical place on earth.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost anything. I tell you, not too long ago, I did a keynote presentation in Brazil, and we always Dan and I always leave about 15-20 minutes at the end for Q&As, and we love doing Q&As because that's where the people get to really be engaged. And somebody asked me, they said, well, you talk about what companies like Disney do in terms of customer service, but, it takes resources, it takes money. And I asked that gentleman, I said, what kind of business are you in? And they had apparel stores, a couple of stores of apparel. And I said, well, here's the thing. When I said, how do most people pay in your stores? He said, with credit card. I said, okay, so when they give you the credit card and they pay, when you return the credit card to them, you said, thank you, Mrs. Cockerell. Thank you for your purchase. Or thank you, Valerie. I don't know if you're on the first, depending on the culture, sometimes people I know in France, they want the last name, they use their last name, but in Brazil, they may be using, thank you, Paul, I appreciate your purchase. Now you're not just a client, you're Paul. And you're like, they recognize me. How much does that cost? Zero. Nothing. It doesn't cost anything, It's just that little touch that makes a big difference. Now, how do you deliver that, though? You need to train people, make sure they understand, so you get them to experience that. How does it feel when, people recognize you by your name? So here's where you work your way along the chain as a leader, right? If I come in the store in the morning and I have 6 or 7 team members working there, if I say, good morning, everybody, or if I say, good morning, Paul, good morning, Valerie, how are you doing, Dan? And I acknowledge everybody, that's a big difference. You're not just a team member, you're Paul, and I know your name, and that's important. Again, doesn't cost them anything. It's just attention, making sure you respect people and you treat them as individual. And now they know they matter.
I can see why you say that it's simple, but not necessarily easy to do. As far as saying good morning, everyone is easy, but being intentional about acknowledging people, even asking how people's days are. I know a lot of times people might not even say morning, they'll just say hello and they'll just keep moving. But to take the time to acknowledge them, ask them how their day is, and actually listen to it, that's huge.
And there's behind employees, there are people who have families, who have doubts, who have hopes, who have dreams, who have ambitions. Find out about all this. They have challenges. They have, when you have somebody new on your team, as a leader, it's really important you go and do, I call this hypercare, especially the first 90 days. It's really important because that's when people, it's like when you raise your kids between the age of 0 and 3, this is where that bonding happens. Well, in a company, that bonding happens in those first 90 days. So as a leader, go meet people, have a coffee. Hey, Paul, where do you live? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? How far do you have to commute to come to work? What do you do on your spare time? So then, you have a favorite football team. What's your favorite football team? Oh, you're not into football. You like baseball. Okay, tell me about baseball. Have you ever played? Because all of that will give me a way to engage with you on a regular basis. Knowing all that will make it a lot easier for us to have a relationship where we build trust, or an environment of trust. And the problem is, when you talk about building relationships in an organization, there's no KPI, there's no key performance indicator attached to it. So what do? We tend to leave that on the sideline. Hey, one of these days I will get to know Paul. But meanwhile, days go by and Paul feels like he's just a number in the team. He's not just, I don't acknowledge him. I don't know him. And that's where people start drifting away from the organization. And by the way, people don't leave organization, they leave people. So if I'm your leader and I don't take the time and invest time into getting to know you, to show that I care and I want to know about you because you're valuable to my organization, but you're important to us and you bring skills and talent and a beautiful smile, and I really want to keep that in my organization, I need to invest in this. But because it's not directly connected with the bottom line of the organization, a lot of leaders will leave that to the side. Sometimes it's not deliberate, but it's just, there's a million other things, asking for my attention right now. So, and one of these days I'll talk to Paul. Well, when the day comes, maybe Paul will have gone to find his happiness somewhere else, somewhere where he will be respected and valued and recognized for what he contributes. So it's something that leaders have to be very disciplined about, is really creating bonding with people right away and creating that great relationship.
That is really good. The intentionality behind that to build that relationship. And I like what you mentioned with the hypercare, like the first 90 days, to make sure that you're getting to know them on the individual basis. So there's a quote I love by John Maxwell that he says, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And that really embodies what you just said, as far as you're not going to be able to inspire or cast vision or achieve any of your KPIs if you don't take the initial investment to pour into your people and understand them, their struggles, their successes, what truly drives them. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know when you talk, were you about to say something?
No, I'm thinking about the bonding thing. I wrote a book called Manage Like a Mother, and I think the approach, much of what we're talking about right now, I've learned over the course of my career. Let me tell you, it did not come to me overnight. All of that I happened to learn over 20 some years, and 16 of those years working for Disney. And it seems to me that when I started reflecting back on raising our 3 kids, because at times I took some time off during my career to take care of the children, and when it was time for me to go back to work, I remember, like most women, I had doubts. Am I still relevant? Do I still have what it takes to be a good leader? And then suddenly I had this epiphany and realized, being a great leader is really not that much different from being a mother. Because you have to train people, much like you train your kids, how to walk, how to talk, how to eat properly, how to have good manners. You have to set expectation, which you do with your kids also. You have to have a vision, and mothers have a vision. They always think long term, about what's going to happen to their kids, their education, how are they going to be able to go to college, and then what kind of job they're going to get. I think once you're a mom your entire life, and then you never stop worrying about what's next, Yeah. So, and then you have to deal with conflict, because when you have more than one kid, there's always a significant amount of nagging going on, right? When the kids are at the back of the car kind of fighting, and you have to be the referee. You have to deal with crisis. You have to deal with crisis when one kid gets hurt and has to be driven to the emergency room at 8 p.m. when the family is expecting dinner, and now the whole dynamic falls apart. You have to continue to develop people, much like you do with your kids. You have to support them, encourage them, much like you support and encourage your kids. You have to give them feedback. Feedback. Moms give feedback every day. Right? They don't say, they don't wait for the end of the year to say, hey, Paul, you did not behave really this year, so there's not going to be any present for you for Christmas. No, they tell you every day when when you mess up. They don't wait. And they still love you unconditionally, right? Yeah. Because they understand that giving feedback is about making you the best version of yourself, making sure that Paul becomes the best adult version of himself. And leaders need to do this. Leaders need to encourage, coach, and really guide their team members so that they can become the best team member version of themselves. And that's that's what it's all about. So suddenly I realized that every single competencies that are required of a great leader are the same that mothers deliver. And by the way, I have to say, I'm not implying that fathers are not involved in raising their kids. But I think when it comes to, our generation, most of us, the vast majority of us, have been not exclusively, but primarily raised by their mothers, right? Typically, it's the mother who stays home and raises the kids. Now, I'm not saying that men are not involved. In fact, the trend is changing for the better. I think more and more men are more and more involved in educating their kids and raising their kids, which is wonderful. But the reason why, sometimes people ask me, they say, why did you call the book Manage Like a Mother? I say, well, number one, because the vast majority of us are primarily raised by mothers, not exclusively by mothers, or a motherly figure, by the way.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a grandmother, sometimes it's an adoptive mother. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios out there. But the vast majority of us have been raised primarily by a motherly figure. And whether you are a woman or a man, you can reflect back and remember when you were a kid, and there were times where maybe your mom was being really supportive and encouraging, and she was giving you responsibilities and empowering you, and you felt like $1 million, right? And then there were days where maybe your mom was holding you accountable for something that she had not set the expectations, or maybe she was asking you to do something that she would not demonstrate herself. And it happens, moms are not perfect. So remember how it felt. At that point, it probably felt very frustrating. It felt unfair. So all this learning, think about it, bottle it up, and think about it when you are a leader and you are there and you interact with people. And remember what it feels like when expectations are not set properly or clearly. Remember what it feels like when, your mother or your father would not role model the things that they're asking you to do. Remember how it felt when your mom or dad were really, encouraging you playing soccer somewhere, and your parents are on the sideline and cheering for you and everything, and you feel like $1 million. Remember all of that. Remember when your parents coach you and give you feedback, and they still love you. So all of that you can apply to your leadership approach. And I think it's such a simple way to remember or to be reminded of what it takes to be a good leader.
That is so good. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's actually what I was going to ask you about next, that you started talking about your book, Manage Like a Mother. So I have it here. I was telling you before we started recording, took a lot of notes down. I really love the direct comparison you would take between being a mother and stuff that you face as mothering your children. And not only that, but even with your parents as well, and how that directly related to leadership. It's phenomenal. As well as, I want to talk about the accountability and feedback portion, because I know you mentioned that a couple of times. And there was a really, I thought it was pretty funny, because I have it in front of me. I took a note on that for chapter 9, the feedback and accountability, that the story about the teacher telling you that your son was not doing well, that he might fail, and was trying to see if he could, actually, you tell the story better, so I'll let you tell the story.
Okay. Yeah, we got a call. Our oldest son, Julian, was in 5th grade, and it was a Friday night, and we got a call from his teacher. He was supposed to turn in a paper on that Friday, and she said, Valerie, if he turns it in, we didn't talk directly, but she left a message. She said, if Julian turns in his homework first thing Monday morning, I will not fail him. I will, give him, I'll take 10 or 15% off his grade, but I will not give him an F. And on the Monday morning, I called her and I said, give him an F. And she's like, what? And I said, yes. I said, look, it is far more important for me that he learns about accountability than maybe I'll have his GPA is going to take a hit, but I think he needs to learn the importance of when there's a deadline, you got to meet the deadline. And if we keep cutting him some slack like this and letting him get away with it, he will never learn that. And for me, he needs to learn this. And she was taken aback, because the kids were in a school where I guess she had dealt with some parents who had questioned some instances and cases where she had failed a student, and she was afraid of parents pushing back. And I'm like, I told her, I said, you will never get a pushback from me. For me, long term, and this is where vision, parents, much like leaders, need to think ahead and look at the future. And like, if he doesn't learn about accountability now, it's not going to serve him well when he becomes a professional, when he, as he grows up, when he goes to university or anything. So just give him the F. And she did. And he was not happy, but I just told Julian, I said, it is what it is. You had the deadline. It was Friday. Friday's on Monday morning. And let me tell you, from then on, he was a lot better at meeting the deadlines.
That whole intentionality about that vision you saw to make sure that this did become a habit of, I missed a deadline, someone saved me, or my mom saved, my teacher saved me. Not a lot of parents would do that. What was there a moment that you you decided that was going to be something that you're going to be intentional about the accountability for you with your children?
It kind of came. I don't think I thought it through. I mean, for me, it was the idea of, how they talk about growth mindsets, the idea that if you have a growth mindset, you learn from your failures. And I believe in this. Yeah. I think we learn the most when we fail, and we learn the most when things are hard. And in the case of Julian, for that particular case, he failed and learned, I thought, what was a very important lesson. And I can think for myself, I learned the most when I was put in a difficult situation. I was telling you earlier, when I was 16 and I moved to London to learn English, I graduated very young from high school. And that's why I had about a year and a half in front of me before, going to university. And I decided to go to London. And when I tell you the story, you may think like, wow, she was brave. And, that was kind of a big step for her to take, because I had 5 words of English. I mean, literally, going to London, I could say, my name is Valerie, I'm French. And that was it.
Wow. And you moved to London with just that. Wow.
Yeah, I applied at an agency that was hiring au pair, and I was matched with a family. And I remember talking my parents into this. My mother was very supportive. My dad was okay with it. And I was acting all grown up and like so sure and confident. And I remember my parents took me to a train station. I didn't fly to London from France. I took the train from Lyon, my hometown, to northern France, and then you would take the hovercraft across the channel. And my parents brought me to a train station. And I acted up all brave and confident. And as soon as the train left the station, I was crying, going like, what am I doing? And it was really hard. But let me tell you, after a month or two, I could function in English. After 3 months, I could have a conversation. After 6 months, I was almost fluent. And I went to school in the morning. So I worked with a single mom who had a 3-year-old, and she was in the show business, and she worked in the evenings primarily in recording studios. So she needed somebody to be home with her 3-year-old, and that's what I did. And so that gave me time to go to school in the morning. So I went to school to learn English, and within 6 months, I ended up staying a year and a half, but it was probably one of the hardest thing I did, and the one of the things that gave me the most and really set my entire life on a totally different course. Because if I had not learned how to speak English, I would not have gotten the job with Disney. I would not have gotten hired for the opening of Disney in Paris. I would not have met my husband, and I probably wouldn't be living in Boulder, Colorado now, and having all this fun I'm having. So sometimes doing hard things, when it's risky, but it pays off. And even if it doesn't pay off, you learn something. You walk away from it with something you learn about yourself, about your ability to be resilient, and then you do better next time. That's it.
Yeah. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. The reframing. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Reframing, yep. And I can't own, that was not me. That's a book title from John Maxwell that really talks about reframing failure, because failure can be something that can be detrimental to you, that can cause you to slip back and not want to do anything, or like you mentioned, you can use that as a stepping stone to move forward and do it better the next time.
Yeah, fail again, fail better. Is that I know there's a quote that is I can't remember the exact quote, but sometimes it says fail, try and fail again, fail better until the day where you can actually do it, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that is. I like also how you highlighted that one decision you made that I'm sure your parents in the moment were not so sure to allow you to move to a foreign country with only knowing 5 words, but how you just lined it up that because of that decision, that is the reason why you're doing all you do right now, from opening up Disneyland Paris to being in Disney for almost 20 years, and now what you do with consulting with your husband. So I do want you to talk more. I know you kind of talked a little bit about one of the keynotes you gave in Brazil about what's more the stuff you do consulting on in your business that you're currently doing.
Well, we do, it first started with Dan. My husband started being a keynote speaker, and I said, I don't think I ever want to do that. But we started doing workshops together. Okay. And we did workshops. Sometimes it's an open enrollment. We do that primarily in Brazil or foreign countries. And then sometimes it's one company that asks us to come and train people for half a day or a full day. Mm-hmm. So, and we tend to be very tactical because Dan worked at the Magic Kingdom. He was the vice president of the Magic Kingdom, and also Epcot and Disney's Hollywood Studio before that. So he has a lot of operational background. Mm-hmm. So he has the tactical things, the tools that he has used over the course of his career working for Disney. And then we have the philosophy of leadership also, the approach. So combining the two was really something that made the workshops that we do very appealing to a lot of organizations, because you hear a lot of great keynote speakers out there. You hear a lot of people who have the theory, they have the approach, the philosophy of what you need to do. But a lot of people struggle to connect the dots, and they say, okay, this was very inspiring, but what do I do now? How can I apply this? So Dan and I, we always focus on providing people tools, things that they can go tomorrow to their organization and really apply the philosophy and make it reality with some very specific tools. And it's worked really well for us. And in some countries like Brazil, I think what's really appealing is having a husband and wife and a man and a woman on stage, because we know in the US we still have a lot of ground to cover when it comes to helping women in the workforce. We have gender parity when it comes to the workforce, but we only have about 32% of leadership positions that are held by women across all industries. And obviously we need to bridge that gap. But when you go to countries like Brazil, the gap is even greater. Yeah. And I have found that when the two of us get on stage in Brazil, you should see after the speech, women come up and they're just like, thank you for saying this. Thank you for advocating for women, because they up and coming in the workforce in Brazil, and there are some brilliant, super talented women out there. And all they need is the opportunity. They just need to be able to put their foot on the first rung of the ladder, and then they will soar. But the problem is they're not always given that opportunity. So it's important that people like me and any woman who can goes out there and helps them. It's about amplifying what women can do and contribute to the workplace. So I'm thinking that, the book may also help in that way, because it's managed like a mother. It's also showing that mothers instinctively have those great skills that they apply when they raise their kids. So why not leverage that, because I think in a way they are uniquely prepared to become leaders because of that emotional intelligence that really comes to them so naturally. Again, I'm generalizing here. I'm not saying this is 100% of the case, but most of the time women show, by necessity, I think women have a different approach to leadership. And I'm not saying it is better or worse than men, but it can complement what men do, and I've experienced that working with my husband. And fortunately, being married to each other for over 30 years, we are very candid with each other.
Yeah.
And what's really funny is sometimes let's say we go in a meeting and we meet a prospective client, and we come out of the meeting with a totally different point of view. My husband's going to be super confident and enthusiastic. He's going, oh yeah, this is very promising. I think this is going to be great. And I'm like, nope, that was not my impression at all. And I'm very skeptical. I don't think anything's going to come out of this. And that was the same meeting with the same client.
Wow.
So how do we get, such a different perspective? Again, I'm not saying he's right or I'm wrong. What I'm saying is, having our two perspective helps us having a more balanced approach, and I think we are a lot smarter together. So my message to the men in your audience, or all the men that are listening to us when we do keynotes or workshop, is like, why wouldn't you want to leverage that talent, that instinctive emotional intelligence that women have, and bring that to have that in your toolbox, so you can be a better organization and you can learn from each other.
Yeah, the way you mention it, the complementing of the diverse perspectives and personalities, that is so crucial to success in any organization. I know DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is really big now. And I know we focus a lot on as far as race and ethnicity, but what sometimes can be missed is the gender differences as far as between men and women. And we still, like you mentioned, we still have a ways to go in corporate America as far as the amount of women in leadership or even in C-suite. So I think what you are doing with Dan, with your consulting, and with this book is so crucial, because I don't know if it was in this book or when I heard you from Jody Mayberry's podcast when he interviewed you, but what you said something that stuck to me, and I want to be more intentional about going forward, about oftentimes that men can be looked at for potential, but the woman has to have the experience. And oftentimes women historically have not been given opportunities to lead. And so it's really important that the work you're doing with highlighting the leadership qualities that are innate to motherhood, and not letting the seemingly lack of experience keep women from entering and really breaking into that space so they can continue to ascend.
Yeah, absolutely. We've transitioned. If you remember, in the 70s and 80s, leadership was about somebody giving orders and everybody else having to execute the orders. That was, it was very authoritative. It was, very much a dictatorship. And then over time we've realized, this is not the way to go, because it doesn't buy you any loyalty from your employees, doesn't get you the results, the consistent result that you need. So now we've changed to a different kind of leadership, which is the servant leadership we were talking about earlier, which requires a lot of emotional intelligence. And I think as women, have this talent, this innate talent, again, this is something that we are slowly gravitating towards, not fast enough for my taste, and certainly not fast enough for all the women out there who feel that they're being overlooked because they don't have the experience. And it's a a lot of organizations recruit based on experience. Well, as a leader, who has the most experience in leadership? They're men, because there's a vast majority of men that hold leadership position. So already in your pool of candidates, of potential candidates, you have fewer women that you have men. So that's why the system is rigged against women.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the only way to change this is to start recruiting based on skills instead of only experience. Now, of course, you're going to look a little bit of experience, but if a woman has the skills, then she should be given that opportunity to go and shine, and she's going to bring this emotional intelligence that is so valuable to an organization today, because when you have that emotional intelligence, this is how you can practice servant leadership and you get better results in the end. So and this applies, by the way, I know you were talking about diversity in general, and across the board, it's not just gender. It's, ethnicity, background, cultural background. It's about age, different generations.
Yes, that's important.
Even different personalities. When you're in an organization, I tell you something which is, I don't think enough people pay attention to. We have in the world, you have extrovert and introvert people. Introverts are not necessarily shy people, but they need to usually isolate themselves, to regroup, to process, to internalize things before they can formulate an idea and they can give their opinion and their perspective. However, in a lot of corporate America, you have a meeting and you have all these people sitting around the table. Who's going to be talking? The extroverts. So the extroverts will dominate the conversation. Often they will hijack the decision-making process, and then, and then a decision may be made. The introvert never got a chance to give their point of view. So this is where a leader needs to be very purposeful, because if you know that some people on your team are introverts, you need to make sure that you engage with them, you give them an opportunity to speak up in the meeting, or maybe you check with them after the meeting and say, hey, Paul, I saw you were, pretty quiet during the meeting. However, I'm really interested in hearing your point of view. So, if you're an introvert, now you have a chance one-on-one to explain, what you're thinking. So there's so many, there's all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think today the world is really complicated, things change super fast. Technology, globalization, competition, climate change, everything comes at you fast. As a leader, you need to make important decisions. The only way you can make those decisions is by having a whole bunch of tools in your toolbox. And when I say your toolbox, it's not your personal toolbox, it's the toolbox of your team. So this is where you need to have people from different background, ethnicity, culture, gender, generation, because everybody brings a different piece to the puzzle, right? And that's the only way you're going to be able to keep your head above water and keep up with the changes, by including people, not only having a diverse team, but including them in the conversation. Because, you can have a diverse team and everybody's in a corner representing, whomever, whatever group, whatever minority group. But what's the point if you're not going to ask their opinion and involve them in the conversation? So, doing that, asking questions, involving them in the decision-making process, that's the only way today that you can keep up. And when we do workshop, I tell you, sometimes we have organizations that come to some of our workshop, and usually they sit at round tables of 8. And I tell people, I say, and if they come, sometimes you have 5, 6, 7, 8 people from, one organization, they always sit together. And I always say, you know what? Look around your organization. If you all look the same, you have a problem. And literally, you see people looking around their table, and they all look the same age group, same gender, same background, sometimes even same training. We did work with a company once, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but they had 9 different departments. And the leader contacted us and said, we really have a problem with people are working in silos. They're all very efficient in their own little world, but they're not collaborating. And when we went there, and I'm certified with Myers-Briggs, so we did a Myers-Briggs assessment before we went there. And then we talked to them. They all were same gender, same age group, same qualification. They were all engineers. And when I looked at their assessment, the Myers-Briggs assessment, they all fell within 3 or 4 of the, you get a 4-letter personality type, and they all had within 4 different, out of 16, they were within 4 different personality types. That's it. And we told the leader, and we said, well, how did you end up with this? He said, well, I recruited, one person, and then I really liked that person, so I went back to the same pool and he had kept hiring from the same pool, which gave him people with the exact same skills, the same perspective. So that was a really eye-opening moment to be able to highlight that for them. And so they saw what they were missing and all the tools that were missing in their toolbox. So.
Yeah, being really intentional with the diversity, like you mentioned, that is insane that they had only 4 different of the different personalities out of the 16 within the team. And it's funny because actually my background is in engineering, so I can guess what theirs most likely was. But so that's very interesting.
It's really, until you go through the exercise, some people, and it's an easy mistake to make, because I tell you what, we all gravitate typically towards people who are like us, because it's comfortable and it's safe and it's predictable. And if you put me in charge of recruiting, I will probably recruit middle-aged women with a French accent. If I'm not purposeful, I'm gonna gravitate towards this because we have a lot in common. So it's like, oh, it's comfortable. But then that's where you're missing out on so much. Yeah. And the chapter I talk about diversity in my book, I call it "What a Wonderful World." Yeah. Because the world is just incredible. The range of talent and skills and interesting things out there is just endless. And I think if you're not interested in learning about others, then you're really missing out on a lot in life. I think there is so much to be learned out there. So much so that, the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know much.
Oh yeah.
And it really never ends. But I'm really, and to me, it's something that's in my DNA. Like I said, when I was a child, I wanted to travel the world. I was always curious about things that were different, and that's what led me to London and to learn English and and do what I do now. So I think I know you have a lot of young people that you talk to and you engage with, and if I had a recommendation for them, it would be go out there and see the world. There's just so much out there to learn from, and in the process, you'll come across something that you enjoy doing, that you're good at, and you'll be successful, and you'll enjoy it. And that's what happened to me, and I hope that people will try and see what's out there and be successful.
Absolutely. That's something I tell them often, is it's really easy to try and figure out your whole world when you're in college, choosing majors, all of that. Which, yes, choose a major, pick something, but that doesn't mean you have to stick with the whole time. There's stuff that come up that you're more interested in that you can try and do. If you had told me even 2 years ago that I would be podcasting, I would have been saying, what would I be talking about? Like, who would want to listen? Why would I be doing this? It's like, what are you saying? So just being intentional about opening yourself up to the possibilities is so key. So we could go on, but we're about out of time. But I do want to make sure if there's anything that you haven't talked about yet that you really want to make sure the listeners hear, that you share it.
Well, I think I said it in those last comments I made. It's all about going out there and getting experience and doing different things and seeing. You're going to take a little bit from all your experience, and some of them you're going to think, well, that wasn't really valuable. And then one day, 5 years, 10 years later, you're like, oh, I know this. I've done this. I've practiced it. I've had this experience. I'll give you an example. Our daughter worked at Disney one summer. They used to have a program for teenagers to work there, and they would be mulching and weeding every day from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Ooh. And Margot, our daughter, did that for 2 months. And And, this is Florida, 95-degree weather,
Humid.
90% humidity, miserable. And she would come back, some nights just totally tired and everything. And she said, Mom, why am I doing this? And this is not fun. And I'm like, you know what, Margot? One day you're going to apply for a job and somebody on your resume will look at this and say, if you're 17 years old and you are able to get up every morning at 5 a.m. so you can be at work at 6 a.m. and do mulching and weeding, in the middle of the Florida heat in July and August, it says something about you. It says that you're reliable, you are hardworking, you're not afraid of sticking your hands in the dirt and,
Getting your hands dirty. Yeah.
And sure enough, I tell you, when she came out of university, she was interviewing for a job and somebody said, you work at Disney? What is that horticulture experience you had? And she talked about it. She said, well, it was actually pretty miserable, but the person who interviewed her and she ended up getting the job was thoroughly impressed.
Wow.
Because who wants to go out there, get up at 5 a.m. and mulch and weed in the middle of Florida when you're 17 years old? You want to be at the beach in Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
But it paid off. So I would say to young people, just go and get some experience. And it may not be glamorous right now. It may not feel like you're doing your dream job or you're learning much, but trust me, you will get a nugget of value there that will come real handy later on.
That's really important, that even if it's a job that you don't really like, you can still learn a lot from it, like you mentioned, as far as the resilience to keep going, the perseverance, just the tenacity that you can learn when you don't quit at the first signs of hardship.
Yeah.
And that's really critical. But it has been incredible having you on the podcast, on the show. You are an amazing leader with so much experience, a wealth of knowledge. I want to make sure that people know how to find you, either your websites or socials. So I'll make sure it's in the show notes. And for those who are watching the podcast, they'll see it come across the screen. But if you can share how they can stay connected with you.
Well, I tell you what, people can find me at Valerie at cockerellconsulting.com. So all our information is there. And my book is available Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Target, Kindle. And I tell you what, I told you earlier before we did this podcast that I don't have big expectations for the book. My goal here, in terms of sales, my goal is to start a conversation. My goal is to pass on some, insights that I have learned over the course of my career. And today I'm thinking, I grew up with my 91-year-old mother still lives in France. And I grew up listening to her saying, I wish I was 20 and I knew what I know now. And I am now thinking exactly like her. I wish I was 20 and I knew what I know now. So I'm thinking, if I can impart a little bit of what I've learned to some young, students, young professionals or leaders who are maybe struggling or need a little bit of help, then so be it. I would be happy to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out, Valerie at cockerellconsulting.com. And I love engaging with people, so don't hesitate.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that's in the show notes and already came across the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But for everyone listening, I hope you got something from this conversation I had with Valerie from the very beginning, that she mentioned that at 16 years old, only knew 5 words of English. I still can't get over that. 5 words of English. You took the chance. You moved to London. From there, that took you on the journey to doing an internship or an opportunity in Florida. And then you went back, you worked in banking. From banking, 2-3 years later, Disney came calling, had the opportunity with 12,000 other people. But the fact that they called you 2-3 years later to start up Disneyland Paris, worked at Disneyland for a number of years, worked at the Disney Institute, worked to so many different organizations as far as teaching the Disney way of culture, servant leadership, customer experience, and creating the magic that is Disney in other organizations as well. I don't think anyone does as good as Disney, but you definitely help them to get a little bit better. It is, and what you're doing now as far as consulting, and I love what you said, starting the conversation, which I really hope the book does well. I think it will, because I haven't seen anything like it, and it's a conversation that needs to be had. Obviously, I'm a man, so I don't understand. From outside looking in, and from my wife, I could try to understand what it's like to be a woman in leadership and in corporate America. But for people to have the emotional intelligence to really take a step back, look at the organization. Does everyone look like me? Do I have diverse thought? And am I including that diverse thought in what I'm saying? I'm excited for this. That I hope everyone else that's listening or watching is just as excited as this conversation I just had.
Well, thank you, Paul. That was a pleasure. Loved chatting with you. And as they said, Disney, they lived happily ever after. So
yes,
there we go.
They lived happily ever after and stay incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.